All right, welcome everybody. I am Rachel Horak. I'm the Vice President of Sustainable Braintree, and you're at our community webinar today. Today, our speaker is from Blue Stem Natives, and the title of the talk is Create Wildlife-Friendly Green Spaces. I'll just point your attention really briefly. Sustainable Braintree is a nonprofit here in the town of Braintree. Let me read you our mission statement, if in case you're not aware of our organization. Sustainable Braintree is a community advocacy group committed to helping Braintree residents, community groups, businesses, and local government conserve energy, promote clean and renewable energy, protect and restore the environment, and live a sustainable, healthy lifestyle. We do offer memberships, and into the chat near the end of the talk today, I'll post some of our Facebook and Instagram links, and you can go learn more about us and follow us on social media. And we do encourage people who are not members to take the opportunity to become a member and make a difference in the town of Braintree. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Nicholson, who's going to be our speaker today. And I'll just remind people that during her talk, please stay muted. And when you have questions, you're going to write them into the chat box, and we will take all questions for our speaker at the end of the talk today. So the way you ask questions is you're going to go onto the bottom part of your Zoom window, and you're going to find chat, and you can click on the word chat or the chat icon, and you're going to put your question in there. And if you would like to ask your question anonymously, you can send me, Rachel, a direct message, and I'll ask it on your behalf. And so if you have any questions today about technical difficulties, you can ask them to me. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker, Kristen. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. All right, let's see if I can share without messing it up. So close. Okay, well, thanks for joining us tonight. Our presentation tonight, yes, the title of this one's a little different, but it's the same type of presentation. Why native? The ins and outs of native plants in the landscape. Our goals for today are to learn about why native plants are so important and how we can make changes to our landscape that support wildlife right in our own backyards. A lot of people always ask me what got me interested in native plants, and they're often surprised when I say it was not all that long ago that I found my love for native plants. It was only about 4 years ago that I had one of those crazy light bulb moments. I was a dental assistant for 18 years. I actually recognize Miss Quigley from the office there. I worked in Braintree, so go down to Dr. Merrill's office if you want a fantastic dentist. But anyway, so I was a dental assistant for 18 years. I decided to go back to school full time and finish my degree in biology. And then one day I heard Dr. Doug Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home, and that light bulb just went off. And I realized that this was what I had been looking for. I consider myself to be a pretty environmentally minded person. And I was very frustrated by kind of the lack of movement when it comes to making a real change with sustainability. You know, we do things like we recycle, we compost and all those things, and it doesn't really seem to make much of a difference. So when Dr. Tallamy said something as simple as planting flowers and planting the right flowers, it just blew my mind, and I was totally hooked. So I became a founding board member of Wild Ones South Shore, Mass, along with my other two partners, Britt and Jasmine. And I just discovered this deep interest and realized that this was going to be it for me. So I dove in headfirst, as we do. I'm definitely not an expert, but I am passionate and I am a lifelong student. So I'm always continuously learning, and I love to teach others what I've learned. I'll start with a little bit about us and how we got started. Blue Stem Natives is a women-owned native plant nursery. We're located in Norwell, Mass. And we strive to grow local ecotype plants from seed whenever possible, which is very, very different from the traditional garden center. We don't grow plants that come from far away. We grow plants that grow right here where we are. We're committed to using environmentally and ecologically friendly farming practices. And our passion is really making native plants more accessible to the everyday homeowner, and increasing awareness and education around the benefits of using native plants in the landscape. One of our deepest commitments is to use the most ecologically thoughtful practices that we can, which is really, really difficult in the traditional horticulture world. Plastics, single-use plastics, it's brutal. We're trying so hard to get away from just the typical nursery plastics, and especially in this economy with supply issues, it's even harder and way more expensive, but we're doing our best. We are trying to reuse and reduce our single-use plastics, and as well as trying to get away from peat, which is currently our biggest challenge, because there's a lot of different layers to changing from peat to other products, namely like acidity levels is something that we're working on. So we're trying out different pots and soil types to reduce those plastics and our use of peat in our growing mediums. This is one of our pet projects. Doesn't look like much here, but this is Barstow Field. We are leasing this from the Norwell Conservation Commission. It is about just under 3 acres of farmland that was just empty fields, and we are using this as founders plots to grow our own seeds. So this is a long-term plan for us to use. We want to just fill this whole thing up with wildflowers and harvest our own seeds. So getting into it, why native? Why is it such a big deal? Well, over thousands of years, wild plants have grown naturally in regions. They're adapting to each region's unique environmental conditions. Wildflower.org is a great resource, and they define native plants as North American native plants, or those that existed here without human introduction. A lot of people will bring up before European colonization, but even that is not taking into consideration how indigenous people moved plants around and traded and whatnot. So these plants have grown up alongside different wildlife, and they have developed relationships with each other. So unlike many non-native plants, native plants that are introduced into landscape plantings are very hardy, and they're less susceptible to pests and diseases, and they are unlikely to escape and become invasive. So native plants provide food, nectar, and habitat for birds, butterflies, and other wildlife. They save water and reduces soil runoff and erosion. And they reduce the time, energy, and pollution of mowing. So I'm going to save you guys a whole bunch of time. As well as they add beauty to our environment. Everyone loves wildflowers. And they bring back the bugs. So I don't want you to panic. Everybody freaks out when I say they bring back the bugs. Humans have a very complicated relationship with bugs. I don't want you to panic. You're not going to have sudden swarms of insects flying all around your yard. A healthy ecosystem has checks and balances. So if you encounter an issue, you should look around to see what's lacking and what's causing that problem. Do you have standing water? Do you have a lack of songbirds? Do you have a lack of bats? And there's many different things that you can do to help fix that balance without using chemicals. Dr. Talamy does talk a lot about this in his Bringing Nature Home book. So I highly recommend that one. So why are bugs so important? Everything is interconnected. These insects are so necessary for the survival of songbirds. So many people will put out bird feeders and want to feed their birds, but those seeds feed adult birds. They don't feed baby birds. And 96% of terrestrial birds rear their young on insects alone. And a lot of people put out hummingbird feeders. And I recently learned that hummingbirds only get about 10% of their calories from nectar. And the rest, the 90% is protein, which they get from flying insects. So if you plant these plants to support and attract the insects, you're going to naturally support the beloved hummingbirds. So spraying your yard for mosquitoes actually reduces the food source for hummingbirds along with other creatures. So again, the baby birds don't eat the seeds that we put out for the adult birds. They eat squishy things like caterpillars. Dr. Doug Tellamy and his research assistant, Desiree Naranja, studied the nesting habits of chickadees, these tiny little birds. I think they only weigh like the weight of a nickel or something crazy. They're so lightweight. But one pair of chickadee parents brings anywhere from 390 to 570 caterpillars to their nest every single day. And so that turns out to be roughly 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars in the few weeks that it takes to rear a whole nest of hatchlings. And they don't fly very far. So the further away they have to fly to find all of these caterpillars, the more energy they expend in order to feed their young. So if you're building this habitat in your own yard, you're going to be supporting the caterpillars to be reared for these birds. And they find these caterpillars in trees along, in different heights. You want to make sure you're doing different levels throughout your yard. And it's great. So it's not just chickadees who depend on caterpillars. If you want to support different songbirds in your yard, you're going to fill it with native plants that will support all these insects. So native plants provide food, nectar, and habitat for these birds, but you might be saying to yourself that, lots of flowers provide nectar and pollen. So what makes native plants so special? Native plants are often host plants, and host plants are ones that support all of the life stages of an organism and not just providing pollen and nectar for adults. It's been said that native plants are necessary. They're potentially 90% of our insect species to survive on host plants, and that they are specialists, which means that their caterpillars can only feed on specific native plants. One insect that we're very well educated about is the monarch caterpillar and butterfly. The monarch, as we know, is the caterpillars are only able to survive on Asclepias plants, the milkweed. That makes them a specialist. And the monarch population in recent years declined to almost 90% loss. Seems to be kind of on the other end of that, but going up a little bit, but we'll see if that improves. And that's really due to a loss of milkweed. People removed it from their landscapes, and as a result, we saw a loss of the monarch. Another example of a host plant is when you are driving through Maine, you'll see what looks like fields of naturally growing lupine. In actuality, these are the non-native lupine, the Lupinus polyphyllus. That's the western lupine. And there, the hybrid, it hybridizes with our eastern lupine, which is Lupinus perennis. It is the host plant for the Carner blue butterfly, which you see there. So unfortunately, since the lupine has hybridized, the Carner blue butterfly is now virtually extinct. There's only about 1% of population that's found in Maine now. So people like to plant things thinking they're helping, when in actuality, they're causing damage to organisms that they're not quite, that they may not see on a regular basis. Native plants help to save water and reduce soil runoff and erosion. Nationwide, landscape irrigation is estimated to account for nearly 1/3 of all residential water usage, which totals nearly 9 billion gallons of water per day. We know in recent years that's become a massive problem with droughts and water issues. Native plants like trees, shrubs, flowers, grasses, ferns, and other plants are accustomed to our soil conditions. So many of them have deep roots which penetrate into the ground and find the water that they need to survive. So during dry summer months, most of these native root systems can reach deep into the water table, and that helps them to become more drought resistant than non-natives. A typical lawn absorbs only about 10% of the amount of stormwater that a natural landscape can absorb. Sometimes we think our lawns look like the one on the left, when in actuality, they look like the photo on the right. They require just an insane amount of water and chemicals in order to look like the one on the left. And it looks like there's palm trees there, so that one totally doesn't even count. It takes so much work. Many of the lawns that we have are actually cool season grasses. So we're constantly fighting in the hot summer months to make these grasses green and survive and thrive when they really shouldn't be at all. As stormwater flows over these land surfaces, it picks up pollutants that include sediment and nutrients from like lawn fertilizers, bacteria from animal waste, pesticides from lawn and garden chemicals, heavy metals from rooftops and roadways, and petroleum byproducts from vehicles. Polluted stormwater runoff can be harmful to plants, animals, and people. So we would like for you to aim to try and keep rainwater on your property as much as possible. And this can be done through rain gardens or even just planting the right plants whose roots can help filter water into the water table and to keep it from running off your property. Speaking of the deep roots of native plants, they do tend to go much deeper than most turf grasses and non-native ornamentals, which is the reason why people need to install irrigation systems for their ornamental plants. This picture illustrates the difference in root systems between non-natives all the way to the left, which is turf grass, and the native plants towards the right. The tiny patch in the middle, all the way to the left there, is turf grass. So when you first install native plant gardens, you do need regular watering, especially when they're little itty bitty. So generally during the first year or so, but typically once they're well established, most natives can withstand prolonged drought conditions without excessive dieback. You can see here circled, this is our beloved little blue stem, what we named our business after. It's our favorite grass. You can also see it in the picture there along with the purple echinacea. It's a perfect grass, it shouldn't even be called an ornamental, but you see this everywhere. You may not know it, but you do. If you're driving down the highway and you see those like little bunches of grass, maybe about 2 to 3 feet high, right now they're all still kind of that tan, dried color. That's little blue stem. It's everywhere and it's a phenomenal grass. So you should absolutely plant it in your yard. In the spring, it starts off this like greenish bluish color, and it is bunching. So you get that nice little draping effect. In the fall, it becomes like a purplish burgundy color, and it has these silvery seed heads at the top. It's beautiful. I absolutely adore it. Ooh, I lost my cursor. This next little circle plant is the purple echinacea plant. And if you notice the difference in the root systems, purple echinacea is actually not native directly here. It's native just a bit south and west to us, but it is really valuable. The seed heads provide both pollen and nectar, and obviously the birds like adore purple echinacea seeds. So it does provide a really big benefit. So it's one of those ones that we let slide. It's not exactly native right here, but you can see that the root system is much different from the little blue stem. It's more of a taproot style plant rather than that meshy grass. So that's important to know what type of root systems you're going to have. And then this little guy all the way to the left, that's turf grass. Barely any root system at all, which is why turf grass could be peeled up just like a carpet, and why you have to water it nonstop. So this one you're going to love, because I'm going to tell you that you can reduce the time, energy, and the pollution of mowing your lawn. Today, American lawns occupy a ridiculous 30 to 40 million acres of land in this country. And a lawnmower pollutes as much in 1 hour as 40 automobiles driving because there are no good regulations on lawnmowers. The battery operated ones are better. They're quieter and they don't require gas. So that's helpful, but they are expensive. And roughly 580 million gallons of gasoline are used in lawnmowers each year. That number is not including other gas-powered lawn equipment like leaf blowers. So you can replace sections or the entirety of your lawn without sacrificing the look and feel of a green lawn space. Carex pennsylvanica, which is Pennsylvania's sedge, is that bottom picture there. It supports over 36 species of caterpillars. Looks pretty cool. I kind of think it looks a bit like Muppet hair. It does this like thing that flops over. You don't have to mow it, but you can if you insist on it. And it can handle, moderate walking pressure. You can't like let the dogs run around on it or not, but you could walk on it without causing any harm. You can also use one of our favorites is wild strawberry, Fragaria virginiana, or barren strawberry. So if you don't want the little berries. And there's a lot more that you can use as well to have that green lawn look without using turf grasses. Native plants add beauty to our environment, but they don't necessarily mean wild, unkept meadows. This is one of my goal pictures in my Pinterest board. This is what I want my seating area in my yard to look like. They can fill a meadow if you want that wildflower look, but they can also be used in much more formal settings. Native plants can be as manicured and as kept in groups as you like, organized. And things don't always have to be all native either. You want to aim to have more native than non-native. I'll mention Dr. Tellamy again. He recommends around 70% of your yard to be native plants in order to have the most ecological impact. So perfection isn't the goal. We're looking to have that important impact without going crazy over it. So if you like your dahlias and you like your delphiniums, you can keep them. It's okay. So those are some of the reasons of why native plants are important. And now I have how you can make your changes, because that's the whole point of tonight's presentation. How do we change our space to make the difference? So these native plants are capable of making a difference with the long-lasting droughts, the accelerating global temperatures, degradation and loss of topsoil. It's getting harder and harder to find good soil, increased carbon emissions. And it seems crazy that just putting some plants in our landscape can help all of these situations, but it's true. It can totally make a difference. 3 very easy steps in order to make this happen. This one drives my dad nuts because I'm going to tell you to lose the lawn, leave the leaves, and plant natives. You can completely remove your lawn if you want to, but reality is most people use their lawn for recreation, especially if you have younger children and pets. So you really want to think about how you use your lawn. How much of your yard do you actually even step foot on unless you're mowing it? If there's corners of your yard that really the only time you're over there is to maintain it, then put some plants down there and stop, expending the energy. So make your lawn reflect your lifestyle. If you're a big entertainer and you like having a volleyball court, then leave your lawn. There's nothing wrong with that. But you probably have corners that you can kind of scooch in and make some beds for some plants. So leave a space for the kids to play, leave a space for the dog to run. Do not ask me if there's plants that dogs can run on and not tear up, because they do. That's how it goes. So turf and clover, excellent opportunities for that. You can use your lawn in strips like pathways. It's pretty. It shows intent around more natural spaces. It helps your neighbors to understand that you're not just letting everything go wild. You are doing this with intention. And it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to transform your entire lawn all at once. That's a huge job and undertaking. And you would really have to have a lot of preparation in order to do that. Because as you're pulling up the lawn, you are also tearing up like all the weed seeds and everything that's already in the dirt there. So you'll just end up with a giant mess, and we don't recommend that. So we say to work in small sections. You want to reduce that soil disturbance as much as possible. Get a nice sharp shovel and go in at an angle and flip that turf over. So you're not even having to throw it out anywhere. Just pick it up, flip it over so the dirt side is up. And that grass is going to turn into organic matter, and it will reduce the topsoil loss. It's ideal to keep your soil and organic matter on your property as much as possible. We spend, how much money going to Home Depot and Lowe's and buying bags of dirt and bags of mulch. And then we will call the tree companies to take down some branches or trees, and they grind up the stumps, and then we pay them to take the wood chips away. Or we bag up all the leaves and put them on the curb. That is all gifts that Mother Nature has given us. Just keep it on your property. You have everything you need to make a wildlife friendly landscape already here. You just have to keep it here. Um, this is one of my favorite thoughts when I was trying to figure out how to talk about removing our beloved turf grass. We were obsessed with it. And this, think of your lawn less as wall to wall carpeting and more like an area rug. That seems perfect to me. All those spaces that we would normally walk on, keep it turf grass. And the rest we can make into beautiful wildflower gardens. This is going to help us save time, money, and valuable resources. Here's the one that drives my dad nuts. He's the type of person to pick up every single leaf. There is an oak leaf does not last on my dad's lawn for very long. But we want you to leave the leaves as much as possible, within reason, of course. You want to use whole leaf matter that falls from your trees as a natural mulch for your garden. And you're going to protect the many overwintering butterflies and moths that are cocooned in the leaf litter. This also promotes further drought tolerance, and it works to add nutrients back into the soil as it decomposes. When I first started studying this, I was shocked to learn how many Lepidoptera, which is the fancy scientific term for butterflies and moths, how many of them overwinter in cocoons that look exactly like leaves and sticks. If you see this one in the top left little corner there, that one is the Luna moth. So if you're familiar, that's that giant green one. It's like the size of your hand. Beautiful, beautiful moth that shows up right around like June, July in this area. And it comes right from this leaf litter cocoons, along with the giant leopard moth. I mean, you can look all you want. You'd be hard pressed to find that kind of cocoon in there. And these cocoons happen not when the leaves are already on the ground. The butterflies are laying their eggs up when the leaves are still attached to the trees. And as the leaves, fall in the wintertime and late fall, the cocoon, the butterflies are already cocooned in there. That's why we also recommend to not use leaf blowers, because these delicate organisms really can't handle like that hurricane force leaf blower going into causes a lot of damage. So obviously there are concerns. You want to be gentle when you're moving leaf matter. Try to avoid the leaf blowers, but you do need to remove leaves from like around your house and walkways. You have to be smart about it. And I'm also not talking about like the 3 feet deep oak leaves that we can have. I'm lucky that my yard is full of maple trees. And so those, I don't even touch them. I rake them away from the house so that it's not slippery or dangerous. But honestly, I just leave them in the yard and they do their thing. But oak leaves are different. They're thicker and they don't break down as easily. So what we recommend is find a corner in your yard, like towards the back, in the woods, whatever you have to do, and move a good portion of those leaves to that corner. You can use just like a little bit of wire fencing and just make a big circle and let the leaves break down on their own. Same with the mulching the leaves. If you run your lawnmower over them, again, you're causing these damage to these guys here. So just gently moving them into an unused corner is the most wildlife friendly option for you to do. And you can also move them into your flower beds and use it as protective mulch over the winter. Most of our native plants can totally just come right up through it if it's not a super thick layer of leaves. When it starts getting a bit warmer, you can always push them away gently and let the light get into them. But for the most part, our plants will just come right up through it. Look at all the time I'm saving, you guys. So we want you also, next thing is to plant native plants. When you have lots of choices for plants to put around your landscape, the types of plants makes a big difference. And we've been conditioned to choose ones that are at our typical nurseries and garden centers, but we have lots of options that we might not even know about. So one of our basic options is the boxwood is obviously a popular plant. I have no idea why it's so popular. I think they're I think they're horrible, honestly. It's not a native plant. It has a terrible smell. If you've ever smelled one, they smell like, I don't know, kind of fishy or gross. I don't get it. And they really have no wildlife support whatsoever. It's just green. And I guess people use them to make fun little meatball shapes or different, what is Dan Wilder calls it, meatballs and rocket ships. So you can shape them if you want. But we have an excellent native alternative, which is this inkberry. This is Ilex glabra. It is gorgeous. It doesn't smell gross like fish. It actually smells quite nice when it flowers. It has teeny tiny little white flowers in the spring. But what I love about this plant is when you let it flower without trimming it back. I mean, you can if you really want to, but this plant will vibrate with insect activity. You will see the coolest bees and wasps and flies and all kinds of things. And I remember, don't panic when I say these things. When you have a plant that is just filled with pollinators, they're not interested in you and I. They're busy getting their pollination on. They're busy nectaring, so they're not going to just fly around and sting you or cause problems. The inkberry is also a host plant for the Henry's elfin butterfly, which is adorable. It's this little guy with it's like brown with a little black eye thing. I should put a picture up there. And it does produce little berries, tiny little ones. They're not, I don't believe they're edible for humans. And if they are, they're not palatable. So it's not something that's recommended. But birds and small mammals love them. So inkberry is an excellent, excellent choice for a landscape plant. How about Rose of Sharon? This is one of my nemesis plants. It's beautiful. It has gorgeous big blooms. The bees obviously love it because it does produce lots of pollen, but it is messy as all get out. It sheds seeds everywhere. My yard is full of Rose of Sharon plants, driving me insane. All I do is pull them all day long. Can't wait to get rid of them all. At some point, this plant absolutely will be put on the invasive plant list in Massachusetts. It's a matter of time. But we do have a native hibiscus. This one on the right is the rose mallow hibiscus machutos. It isn't quite like a one-for-one change. Like you can't really put the rose mallow exactly where you would put the Rose of Sharon, because honestly, Rose of Sharon will grow anywhere and everywhere, which makes them invasive. But the rose mallow much prefers wetter environments. So this is a great one for a rain garden area, or if you want to put it near in a low spot in your yard that kind of collects water after a big rain shower. And also if you could put it where like by downspouts, somewhere where it will get an occasional deluge of rain. This one is great. Honestly, the flowers are even prettier than the Rose of Sharon because they're huge. They're giant. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful plant. This one's a touchy one for people. They love their butterfly bush. It's very aggressive. It doesn't really support wildlife in the same way. It is not, it's not yet invasive up here. However, we think that that's going to change in the coming years with climate change. Down south, not even south, but like mid-Atlantic region, butterfly bush is a huge problem. It is everywhere and it spreads everywhere. So up here, you know, people tell me like, oh, I have a butterfly bush and it hasn't spread in all the years I've had it. And that may be so now, but we fully expect that to change in coming years. So it was brought here from Asia. So it's aggressive in the ecosystem because it outcompetes native plants that wildlife do depend on. It doesn't support caterpillars like we talked about before. Obviously it has nectar. So it's kind of like McDonald's for butterflies. You know, it's not, it's a quick hit of sugar for them, but it really doesn't support much else. Our native sweet pepper bush is a gorgeous plant. If you're walking in the woods, you've probably smelled it before you see it. It's lovely. So obviously not that big purple color, but it has beautiful white flowers. And it can handle shade as well as a little bit slightly sunnier location. And it blooms prolifically. It's a wonderful plant. I say that a lot. It's like children. I don't have favorites. They're all my favorites. Japanese honeysuckle is also on the invasive plant list of Massachusetts. People love the way it smells, but we also have a native honeysuckle. I think it's prettier. It has prettier coloration, and it smells lovely. Obviously, will attract hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love that tubular flower shape. And again, it blooms prolifically throughout the spring, summer, and well into autumn. And it is a vining plant, so perfect for over pergolas and other yard, what's the word? Hardscaping? Something you want to build. The trumpet honeysuckle is an excellent choice for that. I put this one in here to illustrate why the plant choices we make can make such a difference. This one, the tropical milkweed, just because it is a milkweed plant does not mean that we should plant it here. Tropical milkweed is native to Mexico. This is the plant that monarchs, it's like a trigger plant for them. Monarchs recognize it and they're like, oh yeah, we're home now. And that's where they're like attracted to. So when we're planting tropical milkweed up here, it messes up with their migration habits. They recognize it and they don't leave in time, really. So that's why it's important to really kind of hone in a bit on the native plants in the ecoregion when you're choosing plants. You can choose something that looks similar to it with the butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. Super fun plant. This is a great one. Has those great orange colored flowers. Doesn't get very tall, only like 2 to 3 feet. So it's perfect in front of shrubs and everything if you want to hide any spindly legs of shrubs. This is a great one. It's gorgeous. Rosa rugosa. This is another one that is frequently found, especially alongside more sandy habitats. It's super aggressive. It will fill in and you'll never ever get rid of it. But we have lots of native roses. They're not quite the same as like ornamental roses that you would get from England or whatnot, but they're still really pretty. And they do support a lot of native wildlife habitat. This Carolina rose is kind of a pinkish color. We also have Rosa virginiana, which is the Virginia rose, which is more of like a purplish color. And we have ones that are white and yellow as well. Sweet autumn clematis is a very popular vine. It's super aggressive. It will grow up and over whatever structure you have it by. But again, we have a look-alike native, which is, it can be known as woodbine or virgin bower, Clematis virginiana. It smells lovely, like a lot of our native plants do. And it is like other vining plants, it can be kind of aggressive, but aggressive isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is different from invasive. So aggressive means it'll fill in an area when it's really happy, but when it's not in a proper area, it kind of behaves a little bit better. So the Clematis virginiana tends to prefer kind of partly shady areas. So if you have it in a section that gets a little bit more sun, it'll stay a bit on the smaller side and it won't go bonkers on you. But it's also one that's just gonna kind of stay put where you put it. For ground covers, we have quite a few different choices. We would really love for you to stop planting and sharing and everything vinca. Vinca, it seems kind of innocuous, but it's really not. And the reason why we would prefer it not be planted and sold and traded is because in people's yards, it's not so much the problem, but it's out in our wooded areas where the problem really happens. It completely takes over large areas of very delicate woodland habitat, and it crowds out our native spring ephemerals, the ones like lady slippers. Vinca just completely destroys lady slippers because they just can't get any sunlight at all to come up. So we instead recommend planting ground covers that are equally as lovely and spreading. Wild strawberry, I already mentioned that one. You can plant wild strawberry anywhere. It'll grow anywhere. It's a great little plant. And it's also one of the most highest value plants because you could get, a little flat of them and spread them out in a small section. And by the end of the summer, they'll spread out, they'll fill in an area. So if you're going to put some money into a ground cover, that's a great one. And you can mow it if you want to, and you can, if it creeps where you don't want it to, you can just pull it up and put it somewhere else. It's great. We do have wild ginger, which is another one. It's not as prolific as wild strawberry, but it will serve to fill in a space. This is very well suited for shady areas. It doesn't like the sun at all. And these plants get about, I would say, like 1.5 feet tall at their like really max. And then they do have flowers, but they're kind of hidden underneath. They're fun to go looking for. They look kind of space age little flowers. And these are ant pollinated. So that's pretty fun as well. These leaves are very soft to the touch. It is said that it is edible rather, but it's not like the ginger that we eat, like the culinary ginger. So it's not one that I really recommend. I don't think it tastes very good. But we do have some links on our website to web pages that explain eating edible plants. Another one is three-tooth cinquefoil, Sebaldiopsis tridentata. You may have heard of the plant, what was it before? Potentilla. It's one of those ones that recently changed the scientific name. So you may see tags that say one or the other, but it's the same plant, three-tooth cinquefoil. It's an excellent one. It's evergreen, so it'll stay green throughout the whole year. And it's kind of sturdy, not walkable, but it's perfect for right alongside pathways. It would be a really great plant to use. Oh, I doubled my slide. This is one that we would, again, love for you to get rid of. This is burning bush. It's an invasive shrub. It was brought here in the 1860s from Asia. In Massachusetts, it is banned for sale, trade, and planting. So, excuse me, I have the hiccups. If you get rid of it in your yard, you have to bag it up and throw it away or burn it. It's illegal to give it away or take cuttings from it and move it around. So please don't do that. This is another one where, again, it may not be an issue in your yard, but it is an issue in our woods. Because birds eat the berries and they deposit them far away. The seedlings take over forest understories. The US government spends an estimated $3 billion across federal agencies in order to prevent, control, and eradicate invasive species. So if we're able to reduce the amount of invasive species and replace them with native plants, we'll be helping ourselves out. An excellent choice for swapping out from burning bush is our native high bush blueberry. This does produce delicious edible berries. It has the same gorgeous red color in the fall, and it supports, gosh, I can't even think of how many caterpillars. It does have white flowers in the spring, and obviously the birds will probably get to most of the berries before you do. So maybe get a couple of these plants and throw a little netting over one of them so you can share. And this is just a fun little slide showing how burning bush kind of just prolifically takes over our forest understories. In the fall, when you're looking and you see, oh, it's so beautiful, all the red leaves, and they're low, that's burning bush. Whereas blueberry bushes, along with our native cranberry bushes as well, they support so many different creatures, both human and birds and butterflies and caterpillars and mammals of all kinds, that it's really one of the better shrubs that you could put in your yard. I'm going to wrap it up soon, but I do want to talk about cultivars. So we'd like to encourage the use of straight species or wild type plants as much as possible. Many, if not most of the plants available at conventional garden centers are actually cultivars. And cultivars mean cultivated varieties. They're plants that have been cloned in order to preserve a certain attribute. And by cloning these plants, we are reducing genetic diversity. And that in turn leads to a decreased ability to fight off diseases and infections, along with a whole host of other issues. Cultivars generally cannot support wildlife to the same extent as straight species. Many insects and birds rely on color a lot in order to identify plants that they can feed on. So when we manipulate the color of flowers or leaves, we're reducing or eliminating entirely the ability for these organisms to find their food sources. So you might notice that many of our native plants have the same color blooms. Lots of yellows, whites, and pinks are popular for our native plants. And that's because they're the ones best seen by many of our native bees. Varieties that change the physical structure of the plants or of the flowers prevents insects from even being able to reach any pollen or nectar if there is any. That's evidenced by that purple coneflower. These ray plants, when they're nice and open, obviously the butterflies and bees can access the pollen and nectar very easily. But when we have double blooms, they really can't get in there at all. So it's okay. I mean, if that's what you would like to have in your garden, just understand that you're planting those for yourself. Those are not going to be beneficial to the wildlife. That is for your own enjoyment. Um, so the last bit of it is that cultivars are often sterile varieties, and they don't spread the same way as native plants. So one of the greatest aspects of having a native plant garden is that you're able to freely collect and share seeds and plants with your neighbors and friends, which is probably a terrible business decision on our part, because we want to sell you plants, but we also want you to share them with everybody. These are just a couple of quick resources that we love to share. Native Plants for New England Gardens, written by Mark Richardson and our friend Dan Jaffe Wilder. Phenomenal book, definitely. We're going to be carrying this one at the nursery this year. Definitely get your hands on this one. There's so much great information in there. Of course, Dr. Talamy's books, he has 3 right now. He has Bringing Nature Home, Nature's Best Hope, and The Nature of Oaks. They're all phenomenal. You can see many of his webinars on YouTube. Highly recommend them. And then this one, Growing and Propagating Wildflowers. William Kalina is a horticultural genius. He created the Maine Botanical Gardens, and basically if he can't grow it, it can't be grown. So this book is a super prized one. It's out of print now, so it's actually quite expensive on Amazon. So if you come across it at a yard sale or something, you should definitely scoop it up. And then finally, I would love to point your attention to a friend of ours that we work with closely, Dr. Robert Jagier from UMass Dartmouth. He has a citizen science project called Beecology Project, and he uses an app to identify our native bees and butterflies, and you can take photos and identify them and submit them to support his research. He also has a phenomenal list of native plants that are specially designed to support at-risk bee species in Massachusetts. So if you're looking for an easy list of what to plant in order to support our bees, then that's the one to go. And the website's right down the bottom there. And that is the end of it. I went far today, sorry. We are going to be opening May 3rd for a soft open. Obviously, we grow the plants as Mother Nature intended, so we have a small selection in May, and we will be adding more as they come along. But you're welcome to come see us, see what we're growing. We love to talk, obviously, and yeah, join us. And check out our website. That'll have all the information for when we open as well. I went over.
Okay, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I cannot wait for summer to come and plant and go to the nursery. Okay, so while I allow you to take a breather, get some water if you need to.
No, the hiccups. I'm trying to breathe.
I'll remind folks, I just put some links into the chat box. This webinar is being hosted by Sustainable Braintree, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And you can follow us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. And we have a website. And we do encourage people to become members if that is something that you're interested in. And also we posted the website for Bluestem Native and Norwell. So like Kristen said, get excited for their opening on May 3rd. And Kristen, how long do you stay open for the summer?
We will be open all summer long. Generally, I mean, whether we're just an open, we don't have a facility, so it's as long as Mother Nature lets us. So generally through October is when we'll probably, I mean, once the ground freezes, you're not putting anything in the ground anyways. So that's when we sleep.
Exactly. Okay, so we have a couple of questions from our audience. So if you have questions, I encourage you to write them in the chat. And if you wish to ask anonymously, you can send me, Rachel, a private message and I'll ask it on your behalf. So the first question came up. Can you talk a little bit about peat and why peat is not a good option for your garden?
Yes. I think this is going to be one of the topics, the hot topics, environmentally conscientious people are starting to really pay attention to. Peat bogs are one of the most, how do I want to put it? They contain, they're carbon sinks, basically. So that means they're containing millennia of carbon. That's what peat bogs are. They're just, the dinosaurs and everything that's been dying over millennia are just stacking up in these peat bogs. And so when the peat is cut out of the bogs, that's releasing insane amounts of carbon into the air. And it's also being transported around the world. So you're adding carbon emissions for transportation. And it's not a renewable resource. Peat has been, it's like oil, basically. It's been created over centuries. And while, yeah, there's a lot of peat, it's definitely one of those things that it's not going to be here forever. And it's also a very invasive process to get peat out of the ground. They have to go into wetlands. So they're destroying wetlands across the entire world in order to harvest these peat products from the ground. So just overall, it's a practice that we should really work to reduce. I doubt very much that we would eliminate it. And it's not an easy problem to solve at all. It comes with, there's issues across the board. It's kind of pie in the sky to want to remove as much peat as possible, but it's also one of those things like, we got to try. Every little bit's helping. So
would you recommend substituting compost instead of peat?
yeah, compost is great. Especially like leaf compost. That's probably one of the best things. I would say, again, be cautious. If you're getting compost from areas like your town, some towns have compost that they, pick up people's leaves and they compost it, and then townspeople can purchase that compost. You have no idea what herbicides and pesticides people have been spraying in their yard, on their grasses and whatnot. So I personally would be kind of leery to do that. Making your own is the best. Obviously it takes time, but that you have the most control in that aspect. You can use coconut coir, which is a byproduct of coconuts. That's what we're experimenting with at the nursery. We're running into pH issues. That's a big problem. But we're figuring it out. We're working on it. And we also use the leaf mulch. So yeah, I say just give it a try. Peat products are in like everything. Miracle Grow, Pro Mix, just about anything that you would buy for seed starting is going to have peat products in it. So it's not an easy switch to make by any means, but we think it's worth it.
They're talking about that. Louise Quigley's here tonight, and she indicated she tried recycled paper potlets from Botanical Interest Catalog as a substitute for peat for her seed starting. So thank you for sharing that tidbit. And coconut coir, I'll take a look for that because myself, I'm starting my tomatoes next week. Like,
it works well as long as you're aware, and you would want to probably invest in a bit of tomato, vegetables and stuff. It's not as much of a problem, but our native plants prefer more acidic soils than Coconut coir is very either neutral or even more on the alkaline side, but it's not hard to fix either. It's not difficult to fix acidity. You can use a very natural sulfur product to just very quickly change that. So just to be, it's just something you have to be aware of.
Next question. An attendee asked, I know I can't do any plant shopping in May because they have got a lot of stuff going on. But they were wondering how late into the summer can I plant native plants? Does it have to be earlier in the summer, or can it be throughout the growing season before the ground freezes?
If the ground is workable, you can put in plants. It's really just a watering concern, especially in the middle of the summer. If you're putting plants in the ground in the summer, obviously you're going to have to be far more diligent with supplemental watering. When I was saying how native plants are drought tolerant, that is not in the first season. When you first put those little babies in the ground, they need a lot of love and care, obviously, because you're messing with their root systems, and they need to be able, they kind of go through that transplant shock just like any other plant. So they do need to be watered on a regular basis. But once those plants are well established, like second year, third year on, then you can really back off on the watering. So if you're going to be putting plants into the ground in like July, August, just know that you're going to want to water on a regular basis.
This attendee said that they have a shady garden that's full of moss and no grass growing. What kind of recommendations would you make for this person to put in native plants or something more fun?
So that's there's so many things that are that's indicative to me. That tells me that you have a higher moisture content because mosses love moisture, and that also is indicative of a more acidic soil, which is totally fine. I would say you can go, you have a lot of choices. Most of our native plants, I shouldn't say most, but many of our native plants really appreciate acidic soils because that's what our soils are naturally like here. You can do, it's not over, I'm going to assume it's not over a septic system. That's a whole different ball of wax. So any plants that you do over a septic system, you want to, flowers are pretty much like, you can do whatever you want, but shrubs and trees, you have to be very careful of. Yeah, you can do so many plants. Many of our native plants have a wide range of tolerance for sun conditions, where you'll see on our website, if you look on our website, we'll have something that'll say sun to part shade. And the way that that's listed is that sun is what it really loves, and you'll get the biggest blooms, and it'll be its tallest height and big, widest stature. But it'll be totally fine in part shade too. It'll just maybe be a little smaller, or you won't get quite so many flowers from it, or maybe it won't spread as much. So when I spoke earlier about plants kind of behaving differently than ornamentals, non-native ornamentals, that's what I mean. They have kind of a wider tolerance section, and you can fiddle with it a little bit. So you can take plants like, I don't know how shady it is, but if it's very shady, you could do all kinds of things like ferns and asters. Gosh, we have 50 some odd asters that you could put in there. The wild ginger would be perfect for that area. So there's a lot of different plants that you could put in there.
Speaking of shade, you didn't mention anything about hostas, and hostas are kind of everywhere. Are they native, non-native?
Not native. Hostas are not native. They're not invasive. They're hostas. I mean, they're innocuous. I suppose you could probably say they're naturalized, which means they grow fine here and they don't really take over anything. So, I mean, if you like hosta, then that's fine. Again, they're not a host plant for any wildlife here. So they're not going to really support, if you're creating a landscape to support wildlife, I mean, you'll feed the deer. They like the hosta, so I guess that's good. But you're not really doing a ton for the bees and the butterflies and everything else. We have so many great plants instead of hosta. But if you like them, you like them. For every one hosta, you have to plant like 3 native plants. That's a deal.
Presentation indicates I have a lot of work to do on my garden. Big box garden centers are quick to identify the pollinator plants. In your experience, do you think that they're accurate or not so much?
This is an entirely another presentation. When they're talking about pollinator plants, they're speaking about one species, the honeybee. That's it. I have an entire presentation on the difference between honeybees and native bees. Honeybees are European species. They are not a native species here. They are helpful in agriculture. I'm carefully choosing my words so I don't offend anyone, but they are actually not terribly beneficial in the landscape. They carry a lot of diseases. They are causing a lot of issues with our native bee species because they're actually they're kind of bullies. If you have beehives in the area, you may notice that if you see a honeybee and a native bee, like a bumblebee on the same plant, honeybees will actually kind of kick smaller bees and other bees off the flower. So they can be kind of thuggish. So when you see those kinds of signs, pollinator plants at the big box stores, they're talking about honeybees and that's about it. That's why we love Dr. Jagir's website. He goes through, he's really hyper focused on the native bumblebees, especially the at-risk ones. And he lists the plants that specifically support those guys.
And when you talked a lot about invasives and some of them are officially designated, in your experience, how long does it take for those invasive species, those designated invasive species to get pulled from shelves and eventually get out of commercial establishments? Is it right?
Forever.
Yeah.
The problem is the cultivars. That's where cultivars come into play. When nurseries come up with cultivars and they can say, oh, like Rose of Sharon is a perfect example. If you go to the store right now, Rose of Sharon is not designated invasive, but it is definitely a species of issue in the state. But you can buy them all over the place. And you think you saw, like, if I saw Rose of Sharon at the store, I go, oh, you got your mind? Like, it's everywhere. But the varieties that are being sold now are cultivars that are supposedly sterile. And this is highly anecdotal, but I have heard stories of the varieties hybridizing and reverting after a period of time back. So personally, I wouldn't risk it, honestly. But it takes a long time, especially with the cultivars. That's where the money is in horticulture. There's a lot of money in cultivars, and that's what nurseries are going to sell. So speak with your dollars.
Yeah, and you know, it was really striking to me to see how similar your native substitutes were to the non-native, more popular plants. I had no idea.
That's really why we started the nursery, because you can't find these plants. Obviously, when COVID hit, we were all kind of stuck at our houses and paying attention to our backyards and realizing that there was not as much life back there as maybe we remember from when we were kids. And so this comes back to Wild Ones. We were trying to do the plant sale as a fundraiser for the group. And so we were looking for straight species native plants, and we couldn't get them. Like, we couldn't get them. So it was a light bulb. Like, we're like, well, if we can't get them and we're a gardening group ready to spend thousands of dollars, then what are homeowners supposed to do? So we fixed it.
I have one final question. It's about time to start our seeds. So if you want to start plants from seed, do you have any companies that you recommend that are the best and most reputable?
Yeah, so we do sell seeds at Blue Stem. Again, this comes back to eco type, eco region. So ideally you want to get seeds from as close to your location as possible. And that can be really tough. There are some really excellent sources of native plants, but they're in the Midwest. So are they better than nothing? Yes, like Prairie Moon, excellent resource. Like, their website's phenomenal, tons of good growing information from seed. It's a great one. Wild Seed Project in Maine is one of our favorites. We get a lot of seeds from them. And then also Toad Shade Farm in New Jersey is another one. And there's a couple of little small here and there. Again, you're probably going to pay a premium for native plant seeds because they're coming from these little nurseries, and seed production is insanely labor intensive. So you're not going to get, a package of 500 seeds like from, what's the big vegetable seed company, Burpee or something. Like, it's not going to happen because it takes hours. And some of these seeds are microscopic. So be patient and be kind is all I can say. For the most part, native plants require stratification, which means the best time to start native plant seeds is actually in the fall. And it's really easy. You can get flats and put compost in your flats and put your seeds on there, and maybe sprinkle a little sand over the top, put some metal screening over the top, put it outside, put it on your deck, and leave it alone for the whole winter. Just put it out there and leave it alone. And then when the spring comes and the soil warms up, just make sure it stays moist, and they'll grow, and you can transplant them in your yard. Easy peasy. You don't have to do lights and heat mats and everything else like other vegetable starts and other things. Just put them outside in the fall. I like easy. I'm lazy, so.
Well, it's important, right? Like, we all have busy lives, but gardening and outdoor life is so enriching.
Mhm.
And so make it easy. And
Yeah.
like I said, like you were saying, make it easy on yourself. Don't mow the lawn or replace your lawn and then have something low maintenance, and don't pick up your leaves, that kind of
See, what are you going to do with all the time I just gave you guys? I mean, come shop. Yep.
Make differences in our community, right?
Mhm. Yep, exactly. And
So,
it's enjoyable too. That's the best part. Like,
that's right.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Kristen. So again, she's from Blue Stem Natives. It's in Norwell, and they open May 3rd. They're open all summer through October. So we do encourage folks to plant native plants. And we're gonna pause the recording Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having